There's several different paths I can take this afternoon. One path leads me to binge watching videos of people fleeing the police in vehicles. Another path is to maybe say thanks for my grandfather being in my life, where he was more of a parent than my own. I've already talked about it many times, but it's the 20-year anniversary of his death. I'm not super emotional about it, but I am. And I feel like I could feel or hallucinate my mom crying where she is. It's too bad that people with psychic abilities in 2024 are so damn screwed up by the devil of this world, or they choose not to merge their abilities, share their truths, and actually put on the big girl boys and pants. Some people just like to sit and cry and cry and cry until they can't cry anymore. And I do shed tears, but I also communicate with those tears. I'm not fully locked up. So let me, with what memory loss I do have, right, try to navigate that with what memories I have preserved. And that's the importance of writing before my memory gets worse. What I can remember, maybe some things are worth forgetting. All right, what can I remember about this person? Bill Nagl. Bill Nagl was a saving grace in the life of Alex Hansery. More than a few times. I want to steer away from discussing my mother and father. I want to steer away from discussing other things. I want to steer away from being concerned as to whether or not you're going to watch me today, because a certain amount of people are with family or they're doing other things for Thanksgiving to not be distracted by Thanksgiving. Maybe you don't want to think about your grandparents. You have one viewer. I may choose to turn on comments later, but I do get distracted. But at the beginning, I'm going to say this. The positive female comments that do come in, okay, although too many can't corrupt me, right? You want me to think you all like me, right? Be super nice guy. But when it does come in, it does fill me or affect my energy in a positive way, okay? And so somebody leaving a nice comment, is nice. And so thank you for that in the last video. And I look forward to connecting with other females. Others are already on the other channel. So my grandfather was born in 1924. I don't know details about his childhood, but I know that he is of Austrian heritage. He lived in Aurora, Oregon, and they had different relatives scattered throughout the Pacific Northwest. And he worked for the post office there in Aurora, Oregon. What I believe is now, or 10 years ago, it was a coffee shop ran by a black man, which is interesting. Aurora has changed. There are more black people that have moved into Aurora. There is somewhat of a racist element in Aurora, but it has to do with just the nature of America and farmlands as opposed to actual Nazis. So it was difficult aspects of living at home on the farm because of some aspects of the white culture that Bill Nagl did absorb. And that was frustrating for me. I was always somewhat of an outsider. But when I was young, I dealt with archonic interference or demonic oppression from within the family. There was just a dark side of Phil Nagl and Bruce Nagl with the drugs and whatever was going on behind the scenes with my mother that I'll never know about, that Bruce Nagl alluded to, which is so ridiculous that they would, love each other so much when in fact, they really don't like each other and haven't done much to help each other during their dark days. So, Morris Nagl is an example of the older generation where men that went to World War II were given more from the government to better themselves, to homestead. There was the Homestead Act that was passed after World War II. So I'm assuming that may have played a role in the 40 acres. Don't know the exact details, but I know that it was during that time period, around 1960, okay, that the beginning of that life began, okay? And it would be people come and they dislike and send bad energy. So I'll just go ahead and block that, focus on Grandpa. And I had Grandpa's hat for many, many years. It was an NRA hat. And it would be that hat that when I lived off grid as a protective sigil that I had wrapped around the RV. He was very much connected with the RV. There were some psychics that I talked to basically that did believe that after his passing that he was with me. At one point in 2012, I took a picture. Some of you may remember it. It was a picture of the clouds, and it sure looks like his face. My mother's never commented on it. Her only comments regarding him many years ago was very anti-spiritual. Oh, he's gone. It was very much anti anything to do with me having a connection to Grandpa in spirit. It's actually quite horrifying to see her praise Donna a couple of years ago as some sort of a good person. Not from what I remember. They were really cheering on that war in Iraq, and that's not of God. So I'm not saying that my grandpa was innocent, but he was more of a guy's guy than a lot of grandpas, and I don't believe that he was a molester. But there were issues in the household between him and Ruth. So I'll start there. They met in the 50s. One thing I'll mention about Grandpa, when I entered into the troublesome period, I said, well, I had a friend. He got up in Portland. He got on that cocaine. Whether it was my mom and her experiences there, me, his experiences, my uncles, he was very anti-Portland. Really didn't think much of the A-man, but I thought it was dumb. Well, it doesn't take much to beat up a drunk. But he had a certain, country boy can't survive basically attitude that a lot of people venerate. He basically could have been a famous celebrity or YouTuber with his persona. And back in the day before YouTube, certain people were like that. They had certain personalities and quirks that made them really unique. So we hung out a lot at Top of the Hill restaurant and took me there a lot. There was never any type of rite of passage that I had with my dad or mom, really, as far as going places on a regular basis out in public. As far as, because poverty was always a big deal. A few places with my mom, but mostly New Age freaks that worship aliens. So I think that brought about energy. And then there was my dad, not Elephant Castle. That's where he worked actually back in the day, but Escape from New York Pizza. We would eat there at the PSC location before they destroyed it. But he really didn't like to take me out to eat, but he'd like to make food at home. Whereas with Grandpa, he took me to the Top of the Hill restaurant. And also there was, I forget the name of it, but it was a Chinese restaurant in Canby, Oregon, right there on 99E. And then I think there were some trips to Dairy Queen. And then, of course, trips in the truck to get the orange vanilla ice cream, whatever, at the convenience store. Then we would go down the hill there from Top of the Hill, Airport Road. And then, of course, yes, the many, many trips in his airplane. And I can't remember where. I'm going to guess Yamhill, Oregon. There's basically, like in various places in rural Oregon, places where you can take an airport or a plane and basically fly. So the whole experience of being up in the air and basically looking down at the ground, looking at all that, and just remember the memories. Look at all these squares. Why do they look so conformist with the big agriculture? Look at that square there, a square there. What the hell are they doing down there? Looks so weird and artificial and grid-like from up here. That's what I remember. Of course, we get that feeling, of course, when we do commercial flying. I think it's a slow news day, isn't it? It's not a slow news day. All types of mayhem is breaking out. We covered the news yesterday. So he knew that Portland was bad for me. But yeah, growing up on that farm, if it had not been for him, specifically giving my mom a place to stay, who knows what type of child abuse at the hands of my mom's boyfriends, giving her a place to stay. Well, I could have, if it wasn't for Bill Nagl, I could have been subjected to rape, child abuse, my mom being put on drugs, my mom raped in front of me. I don't know if she realizes how awesome her dad was. I think I determined in the end that she was a spoiled brat who was given everything and somehow incarnated in this world, who actually wasn't molested and really could have done a lot more with that time that she was given to basically sit on her ass, not work, and basically scream at her son and start worshiping aliens, let the aliens get into her mind, her ass, everything, and fly her ass to the East Coast and develop really hateful thoughts about her kid and everything. And so it's really important to see how good dads like Bill Nagl ended up, though, with decrepit, spoiled children that basically, as far as I'm concerned, don't really appreciate him all that much, don't really venerate him in public all that much. In fact, it's almost like they think they're holding on to secrets. And it's true that there is that whole thing about them possibly keeping secrets when he went to see Donna. But unfortunately, we're not a very evolved society. people do fight, scream, get out, get out. And that's what Ruth did. And eventually he did get out and ended up, and this is unfortunately what happens to a lot of American families, but it doesn't mean then that he's the ultimate sinner. It's the complicated reality of the court system where people decide that they're going to divorce. Well, guess what? Now it's time for the farm too. And ever since that happened, okay, and my mom went into a much darker direction. We went from the sanctuary, if you will, of Aurora, Oregon, to the dirty complex, apartment complex energy of Southwest Portland near PCC, Sylvania. Okay. It's Thanksgiving, so who knows what's going on out there, but it would be through and only through Bill Nagl that I even had Thanksgivings. I'm trying to think of the years. But, you know, to get right to the point, he rescued me many times from my father. Okay, so we're jumping around, but I'm going to take you right now to 1996. 1997. He picked me up over 5 or 6 times when my father was violent. And he drove as an old man from Canby, Oregon, up to Portland, Oregon, where I stayed in the apartment with my abusive dad. He would pick me up and rescue me. And then my dad was already in a psychology of, I want to throw you away prematurely so I can screw you up, just like my mom. Yet they don't see things in that light, even to this day, which is so scary that they have such cognitive dissonance. And this really should be a wake-up call to those of you out there. They have theories about a collective shift in consciousness, ascension. You know, as far as I'm seeing, my mom, my dad, Amen, others, they just become worse as time goes on. They don't really deal with the guilt of their satanic activities. And so they just become resentful and bitter towards people coming to the light. The true light, not the new age light. Okay. Now, it is difficult for me to ascertain with people coming and going, whether you're appreciating this, liking this, or disliking this, because you're coming and going so frantically. So comments will be off because there is so few bits of positive energy that come at me. Unfortunately, women don't understand that unless you send me some positive energy or a little bit, I'm not going to be very relaxed, but I try anyways. It is a goal of mine to quit all forms of vape, all forms of certain types of content, minimizing screen addiction, and getting back to writing. But I feel my spirit, the spirit within Grandpa, cheering me on more than my own family, which is what this is about. Grandpa's cheering me on. Okay? And realizes that I'm a patriot. And Grandpa told me, you don't tell them what you are. You tell them you're Italian. And I thought that he was trying to tell me to be a victim. And now I realize Grandpa was right. It was wrong for me to tell you what I am. He was wrong. Grandpa was right about you. Grandpa was right about the world. Bill Nagel's a good man. You didn't need to know that I was this, that, and the other. I could have had a whole different life 20 years ago. If I didn't use my name, didn't mention ethnicity, I could have saved my own life if I had the common sense. I just wanted you to love somebody like me because I've been so hurt. I just want to give you a chance of healing that negative karma that some of you have created for yourself since your people staged that 9/11 event, but it just couldn't happen. Maybe if I start a new channel and I don't volunteer such personal information, women might be attracted to me that don't have that natural, but Grandpa knew your ways. Grandpa knew. You tell him and he said in the end, it wouldn't surprise me if they took down them towers to start a war. And so that would be a spiritual thing for that older white man to go, wow, I was duped by George Bush. Now, he didn't have that moment with me, but in his last years, I was trying to kind of wink to him, I'm going to become a truther and expose this stuff. And I don't know if he was dying of cancer. And I believe that the chemotherapy accelerated his death. And Donna Peterson looked down upon me for criticizing chemotherapy. And he was brainwashed by her. They were all part of the GMO, pro-war, microwave oven. You know what I'm talking about? Can I get an amen? They were part of a certain generation of worshiping corporations, stocks, bonds. You know, I mean, it worked out for my grandpa's generation for a while. And then 9/11 happened. And with a few years, you know, like the old ways were gone. The old world was gone. And it was us being fast-tracked to the new era. So that was a very transformative period in time, 2003, 2004, 2005, with that solar cycle and its influence on cardiac. And that would be the time period in which he left. And I remember taking Gunnar to visit him, to meet him for the first time. I wonder if my grandpa understood at the point that he was the one that got me in all that trouble, that led me down that dark path, and that would not have happened had that person not been in my life at all. There's no way I would have ever sought out that substance. But again, more on Gunner Standard of Los Angeles in another time. He's a big time foreman now. Telling a bunch of Mexicans what to do as he puts on the helmet. Even though he's done bad things, he has the privilege in this society of having a bad history and hooking Mike Bluehair up with bad things and continuing to prosper while not actually making real amends and being a fake recovering alcoholic. And so my grandpa tried to steer me in the right direction, but he wasn't perfect. It seems that through me, he was trying to make right, even though from a somewhat psychic perspective, this is what I see. He was trying to do right through me where he didn't do right through my mother and uncle. And they were vocal about telling me that they had mental problems, jealousy. Well, grandpa spends more time, but in the end, he gave them an unknown amount of money. And so they are documented psychopaths. My mother, Bruce Nagl, Phil Nagl, that they absorb money from that dude. Yet they never gave a shit. One thing my friend was at, where was your mom? What was your mom saying when you were homeless? Just to remind me. And so it's like, it is very traumatic, but it is the story of a good dad who worked hard, wasn't perfect, and was arguably from a crazy woman, my grandmother, driven out of his house into the arms of another woman. They sold the farm. And then from that, no longer basically giving welfare to his children, no longer giving free money to his children, they abandoned him and went in different directions. Bruce Nagl actually stole silver from Bill Nagl in his last year. And because of, blood ties, blood is thicker than water, and because I'm mixed, I got nothing when he died, and Bruce Nagl got an unknown amount of money. So Bruce Nagl actually manufactured methamphetamines up on the land. I get it was the 80s, this, that, and the other, but I think it almost takes a demon type of a child to even do that, even if it was the 80s. I mean, don't you think? Or do you think that Bruce was awesome? I think that your society in general really apologizes quite often for white criminals, white thugs, and loves to point the finger at the Mexicans and blacks. And this was the way of the Nagels. And the reason I understand the psychology of a lot of you is because I grew up with Bruce and those 1980s white supremacists. I mean, I understand the psychology of where a lot of you are coming from in some of your negative views of me, Mexicans, others, because of the Nagels. But despite that, it seemed that my grandfather at least tried to do right on a level. And I see some of you are coming and going. It's Thanksgiving. I don't expect you to stay here, but I'm really bearing my soul here. If it wasn't for this dude, I don't know how. Maybe the system or city of Portland could have helped me. Maybe. But it sure seemed that there was a window in time there that I was really fucked without him. You know what I mean? And it really took maybe a few years for the Central City Concern to, I don't know if they would have had beds for me in the earlier period. I just don't know, or I wouldn't have known about it. I didn't know about rehab. I didn't know about any of that stuff, but I was all about it once I realized I had a problem. But it was because of Bill that I was able to get away from Portland, Oregon. Okay. Whereas a lot of other people, had they not had a decent grandpa, they would end up what? Homeless in Portland, Oregon as a youth. And in the late 90s and early 2000s, there were a lot of, not that I would have become one of them. I mean, me, one of the gutter punks, you never see people other than whites and blacks with the gutter punk crowd. It's the token blacks and nasty white people with ugly ass tattoos and purple hair and shit. Never. So left wingers in Portland are as Nazi as it gets. They're so racist. It's not even fucking funny. Which is why Portlanders are not in this audience. Which is why Portlanders can't take constructive feedback. If Portlanders were actually against racism, they would be so down with the shit that I'm talking about. From Eli Ritchie to the whole gang. If they were actually not down with white supremacy and tribalism and being cool too for school, they would totally be down with Alex Ansary content. So anytime I come across a Portlander who has repented of their Portland stripper loving ways, horrible coffee, Stumptown loving ways, high rent loving ways, fake ass compassion for the homeless, expecting the government to fake ways, just get away from them unless they're doing something good for the world. They're vampires, which is why they find me, because I'm a light being. They want to come and go num, 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 because they're like gobblers. Okay. And so let's get back to Bill. Bill Nagl, in the year 1980, rescued my mother from a domestic violence situation, right? I guess, I don't know how my mom was able to call, but my father ripped the cord out of the wall, around 20th and East Burnside. And Bill Nagl drove up with a shotgun, and he basically make my day went down. My dad's such a retard. Even after that, he kept calling him dad. Hey, dad. Hey, dad. In like a super feminized voice. What an asshole. Yet he loves worshiping that big black cock via football worship. What an asshole. But anyways, out of all those men, I don't recall my grandpa to be spiritual overtly, but because he helped people, because he helped his son to a level, and his son stole from him, because he helped my mother, because he helped me, because he helped others, he's more of a humanitarian than any of them. He's more of a patriot, okay? He is somewhat of a rebel. He never liked the police state. He did believe the whole Bush thing. I was disappointed to see him praise George Bush when George Bush did the whole, Saddam Hussein, you got 40 hours. He's like, oh, that's so beautiful. Him and Donna were high-fiving all the way, and I'm like, facepalm. And it was at that exact moment in which the system was killing him, radiating him. If you know anything about basic health, you know that basically radiation. Are people just coming and going and disliking? I don't know. For those that don't know, I'm at least 3 or 4 months sober of looking at likes and dislikes on the back end. And it's taken this long to get that super silent. And I'm going to the next level in overcoming the limitations. I'm going to create whole new platforms, whole new identities, create whole new followings, completely devoid of this channel. And people basically that have been taking me and my essence and energy and intelligence for granted for how many years now? Without a single email. But those days of begging you to email me are coming to a close. I am learning to accept my poverty, accept my sadness, accept my isolation as a gift from you. For if you nasty ass women in the audience actually saw something in me and drew to me the bad energy of the bad men you're with, the bad boys you're with, it would be very bad for me and drain me, just as those past experiences in Portland. And so Bill Nagl, also, let's talk about Bill Nagl, bad boy. Bill Nagl bought me alcohol when I was 20. Of course, I did something stupid and picked up Vincent Caliendo and backed up the vehicle into the steel mailbox and smashed the damn thing. That was embarrassing. My first experience at drink and drive, and I couldn't even make out the parking lot before smashing. Yep, you heard it here first. In the year 2000, in my attempt to drink and drive, I'm cool. I'm 20. I'm going to drink and drive at 20. I back out of the parking lot in the rural Oregon, didn't even make it down the road, and just smashed into the back of and then just go, oh, shit. So that was it. That was the universe going, you do not know how to drive yet and drink and drive, nor even drink, let alone drink and drive without smashing shit. I don't know what my excuse was, but he was just like, oh my God, dude, you are just fucked up, bro. There's something really wrong with you. He knew something was wrong with me early on. He just didn't know how to fix it. And he was just like, you know what? You need to get over whatever your mom did, or just, he didn't understand, bro. I'm mixed race. I'm like retarded to everybody. Like I'm ugly looking, big old nose, weird eyebrows, crazy ass hair. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm not. No, like when you're like this, you're going to have certain genetic defects. You're not only going to be unattractive to certain people, especially if you talk about your racial trauma. That's super unattractive to women. They won't get anywhere near that. You have to be, I'm so confident. I actually don't like women that are like, you must be so confident. It takes a real man to cry, actually. It takes a real man to confidently share his trauma. I confidently share my trauma. So I can be a life coach for young men and women in the future that might be a little bit more conscious, intuitive, and engaging than those of you that are incarnated with me in this current moment in time. I'm hoping to see more engagement with future humans of the future that are going to be way more excited than y'all are to even get a chance to watch this channel. Some of you've just been here too long. It's easy if you take me for granted. It's really up in the air, in my opinion, whether to give you more content or to pull back and just do this once. Really, I might just have to consult the pendulum, get a little schedule down. But the point is this: the rabble rouser part within me is ancestral on both sides. Okay, he was a hunter. He was a World War II veteran. He was a pilot. He was a fisherman. One time he went fishing. I caught all the fish. He was like, what the hell? He was the only person who took me camping. He took me to Eastern Oregon, where he owned property at Boardman. My dad would say stupid shit and call him the richest man in Oregon, which is just like facepalm. My mom would hate that anytime we call him rich. He wasn't the richest man in Portland, but he had an unknown amount of resources because he had his hand in different pots. basically, from being a businessman, Nagl floor covering. He had different complexes where people rented, basically. And so when the divorce came, he and Ruth split some of it, but ultimately he held on a lot of stuff. And then when he passed, those resources or his blood or his essence, if you will, flowed into the mouths, the veins of the little ones that never grew up. Like Peter Pan, never then. I'm a Toys R Us kid. I'm never gonna grow up. How's the song go? And so that's the thing to understand about some of these souls that used to be seemingly spiritual, becoming dark as they get older. And it doesn't have to be that way. You really can be an old guru, teacher of many, until your last days. And that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to continue to be a teacher, and I'm continuing to work not for, excuse the French, sex. I'll just be clean there. Money, houses. Now, house is a function, is a utility. Okay, being able to pay for the internet, to be able to pay for clothing and food. These are the basics of life, and I'm only interested in the basics of life, and that which might make female partners or friends comfortable in the future, like in the future having a plot of land. This whole off-grid thing is very much my grandpa. My grandpa would probably be the only one that really cheered me on in spirit out of my whole DNA. Maybe also the ancestors on my dad's side. I felt sad when I left my grandpa's hat in Durango, when I left in a hurry. And then part of me felt angry at grandpa because of what happened for a while. Almost like, I don't know. Like I blamed him for me having to leave Oregon. And I feel like something, or some of his family or the Nagls, they should have done something for me to keep me in Oregon. But that's not what they wanted. And that's not what was meant to be. So I want to talk about this and leave as we approach 33 minutes, which is our average time for a video. In the late 90s, in the 2000s, wherever I worked and wherever I was living, he would drive up in his car 30 miles up to Portland, Oregon, and pick me up and then take me back down to stay with him and Donna. And during those years, early years, I never had to stay in the garage like a dog. Donna allowed me to stay like a human being in the house, in the bed. But again, it was treated like, oh, you're being privileged because we hate our family. Our family's not, well, that's your problem. That was just awkward that they even have that type of demeanor. But that would have something to do with the nature of those souls, the Petersons and Nagels not being very good and being takers. I think, was a little bit more deserving of maybe grandpa being my foster parent in those years, making sure that I never met Gunner, worshiped the A-man or anything. I could have had a parallel life too if grandpa took me in as a teenager, but maybe life would have been tough for me at Canby High with the racism there in Aurora. They punched me in the head more than anybody in Portland, Oregon. The Aurora, Oregon kids. They are racist as fuck. And still to this day, I still don't know of a single person from Aurora that's ever heard of me, that's ever found me, that ever. And so basically, a lot of these people in Aurora, they like to play up the, oh, we're so loving. We like Bill Nagl. Yeah, you like Bill Nagl, but you don't give a fuck about his grandson. You care more about his son, even though his son's a tweaker, because he's white. There is real institutional white supremacy in America, and Aurora, Oregon is a shining example of it, which is why my mother being judge, of course, two of you just drop right away. Fuck off, unsub, and don't you ever come back. Okay, I'm 20 years deep into this show. There's never been people in the audience that have cared about my life story, just to make sure that we're clear on this. And I have an autobiography, Cliff Notes. You ain't interested. When I share to women that I have an interest in, they stop talking to me. Oh, that happened to you? Oh, that's your dad? Oh, that's there? That's just heavy. Bye-bye. And it's like, you are a world in which people tell their life story. They tell their sobriety story. When it comes to me telling this stuff, nobody's fucking interested, man. So we'll just continue and leave here in about 3 minutes. But the point is this. It was only because of that guy named Bill Nagl that I even had Thanksgiving dinners. Whatever Bruce Nagl tried to recreate was so super uncomfortable, so stale, so unfriendly. You know what I mean? Whatever was going on briefly at their ugly, overpriced house where they used to live in Aurora. Like, talk about what a poor taste and waste of money. And then they abandoned it for some other shithole. Hopefully they're in a better place now, you know, but drugs really fuck your brain up, and you're not really superior when you destroy yourself and bring a bad energy to your family land. I didn't do any shit like that. I didn't manufacture anything. But when I used heroin, Bruce humiliated me. And even after I was sober for years, he would say on the phone, "You still sober? Hey, you still sober?" And I'd like be on the phone like, "Dude, are you a fucking monster or something?" And then he would brag about having fornication DP with his wife, which led to, so I mean, these kids that came out of Bill, oh my fucking God, bro. Which led me to really begin speculating, like, what is their gene line? What's there? This Austrian Anglo-Saxon gene line, what is there? Some of you have some suspicions. Some of you are hiding secrets from me that know more about this dark history. You want to start talking? I think you already know. There's also the big time worship of animal heads all throughout that place, and guns. And while Grandpa was smart, he actually was showing off his gun to one person one day and straight up blew out the window. So while he was smart, he also would wake up in the middle of the night and go, "Ah!" When I went with him and slept in the chair in Boardman, Oregon, he seemed to have some sort of PTSD or mental condition where he would wake up. And so my family never disclosed any major noticeable details about mental illness that was inherent within the Nagl history. And because of what I know about institutional white supremacy within the programming of yours as our society, I'm assuming most of you would blame my dad, right? For any perceived flaws. Is that not correct? Is that not correct, soldier? Sir, yes, sir. Exactly. Tell me the truth. Under penalty of perjury. Which side do you look at for the brilliance and the low side? The white side or the dad side? Girl, you know it's true. Oh, and if you're not on the dark side, more power to you. I love you. But to the rest, return to sender. Because if people really respected my grandpa, they would respect me. If people really respected America, they would respect me. If people really gave a fuck about their white daughters not getting trafficked to China during the future end times, once they track them down via the TikToks, they would respect me. But because of this institutional hate within our society, once Bill Nagel's out of the picture when he passed, exactly to this day, within 24 hours, 20 years ago, the Petersons never talked to me again. Ever. The song played at his funeral, Always on My Mind by Willie Nelson. We will conclude today's recording. There were some less positive things that I could say about my grandpa. When I did do drugs, he was very upset that I kept struggling with it, you know, and when I stole it once, he said, you know, the people in your father's country that cut your hands off, or something derogatory. And then he apologized, but I feel like he was revealing his true nature and he couldn't hold it back. And I felt that was hypocritical because his son was in way in deeper. And I see meth is way more demonically summoning than a trauma victim who was abused by parents doing heroin. And he had no knowledge of marijuana, like the Nixon era of all drugs are bad and this, that, and the other. And so the problem is with old people that don't know about drug recovery, they don't, especially now. Like right now with the fentanyl crisis, there's all these people on this. There's no discussion about whatever trauma happened to them to even get them to think about it. They're just constantly talking about fentanyl problem, but what's going on with the people taking it? Why are they taking it? And then another thing, why can't there be a maturity within human society to make the right form of marijuana legal across the board to where trauma victims like myself don't get victimized and led into Satanism or evil things like drugs. Drugs isn't necessarily Satanism, but hurting your body could be argued to be. Maybe that's a bit far, but Gunner Standard did try to lead me into various forms of carnalism and violence. I told you about it before. So it is true that when you're born in this world, evil people and evil men and women, evil dicks, evil vaginas will make a beeline for your chi to take you off your path, get you into a cave. That's exactly why Gunner was born. Standard. Lead many people into sin and danger.
Maybe I
highly doubt he's into end-hour meditation. So this is the video. And so my grandpa did try to steer me straight, but he was one man. He wasn't responsible for having me because he didn't have me. He is not the one who took off his clothes. It was my mom. But my mom chose to not be responsible, chose to abandon me, and then he was left picking up the pieces. And so it was because of that, and only because of that, that I was the most upset, sobbing, and sick with an illness that came out of nowhere within the very day of my grandpa dying and me recording my first show about 911, which you don't have a copy of. I don't have a copy of. I don't. He still has a copy of it, but I sent it via VHS to the one and only Alex Jones of Infowars.com. Before I went and visited him in September 2005. Which would be 9 months after my grandpa passed.